A major disaster is unfolding across Canada, one that no one saw coming. This is not just a minor hiccup in the construction industry. This is a crisis of catastrophic proportions. Engineers have uncovered critical foundation cracks in thousands of buildings, both residential and commercial, that could lead to the collapse of entire districts within months. The discovery of these structural flaws, some of which are already causing significant damage, has triggered widespread panic. More than 2,000 cracks have been reported in the past week alone, and the situation is rapidly deteriorating. It is clear now that this is not just a localized issue, but a nationwide crisis that could shake Canada to its core. Major urban centers like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are facing the brunt of this disaster, as thousands of people are forced to evacuate their homes and businesses. The cracks, which were initially thought to be isolated incidents, have quickly spread throughout Canada's largest cities. Engineers have been working around the clock to assess the damage, and the news is worse than anyone could have anticipated. Some of these cracks are so severe that entire buildings are now considered uninhabitable, with others teetering on the edge of collapse. The structural integrity of skyscrapers, office towers, and even government buildings has been compromised. Authorities are scrambling to evacuate residents and ensure their safety, but the scale of the problem is overwhelming. Thousands of people are being displaced, and the situation is only getting worse. The implications of this discovery are far-reaching, not just for the immediate safety of Canadians, but for the country's economy and real estate market. This is not the first time Canada has faced issues with its infrastructure, but the severity of this crisis is unprecedented. The country's aging infrastructure has long been a concern, with many buildings constructed decades ago using materials that are now showing signs of wear and tear. However, the widespread nature of these foundation cracks is something that no one could have predicted. The cracks have been found in buildings of all ages, from brand-new luxury condos to aging office buildings. The discovery has raised serious questions about the quality of construction materials used, as well as the regulatory oversight that was supposed to ensure their safety. The immediate fallout from this crisis is already being felt across the country. Thousands of businesses are being forced to shut down as their buildings are deemed unsafe for occupancy. Construction companies, developers, and contractors are facing huge losses as projects are halted and buildings are evacuated. The financial strain on the real estate market is becoming apparent as property values plummet. In Vancouver, for example, the real estate market was already struggling due to rising interest rates and a lack of inventory. Now, with thousands of homes and buildings rendered uninhabitable, the market is in freefall. Buyers are pulling out of deals, and sellers are left with properties they can no longer sell. It's a perfect storm of economic disaster. The government is under immense pressure to respond to the crisis, but their actions have been slow and disjointed. Officials have promised emergency funds to help those affected, but the scale of the problem is far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. The federal and provincial governments are now scrambling to find solutions, but the damage has already been done. In the face of this disaster, there are growing calls for accountability. How could this have been allowed to happen? How could so many buildings, some of which were considered state-of-the-art at the time of their construction, now be at risk of collapse? As the evacuation orders go out, the chaos is escalating. People are scrambling to leave their homes, unsure of where they will go or when they will be able to return. The psychological toll on affected residents is immense, as many are losing everything they have worked for. For some, this disaster means losing their homes and businesses. For others, it means facing an uncertain future as they try to navigate the maze of government assistance programs that are struggling to keep up with the demand. The financial strain on these individuals is only compounded by the skyrocketing cost of living, with many people now unable to afford even the most basic necessities. The situation is particularly dire in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, where the real estate market has been one of the hottest in the world. In Vancouver, prices had already reached historic highs, pushing many people out of the market entirely. Now, with entire neighborhoods being evacuated and thousands of buildings rendered unsafe, the market is facing a total collapse. For those who have invested in property, the future looks grim. Homeowners are now facing the possibility of seeing their investments plummet in value, and many are worried about the long-term implications of this crisis on the Canadian economy as a whole. As more cracks are discovered, the full extent of the damage is becoming clearer. Engineers are working around the clock to assess the situation, but the task is monumental. Each day brings new reports of cracks being found in previously safe buildings. Some of these cracks are so severe that entire districts are being closed off, with residents being told to leave immediately. The damage is not just structural. It is economic, social, and emotional. People are losing their homes, businesses are being forced to shut down, and the government is struggling to provide adequate support. The real threat now is the possibility of even more widespread destruction. As more buildings are found to be at risk, the situation is quickly spiraling out of control. Experts are warning that without immediate action, entire urban areas could become uninhabitable. The cracks are not just confined to the foundations of individual buildings, they are spreading throughout the entire infrastructure of Canadian cities. Roads, bridges, and public transportation systems are all at risk, and the potential for a complete collapse of urban infrastructure is growing by the day. If this crisis is not addressed soon, the consequences could be catastrophic. The financial implications of this crisis are also becoming clearer. The real estate market, already struggling with rising interest rates and a lack of inventory, is now facing an even more severe downturn. Property values are plummeting, and many homeowners are now unable to sell their homes or even afford the repairs needed to make them livable. Developers are facing bankruptcy as projects are halted and buildings are deemed uninhabitable. Banks are pulling out of the market, unwilling to take on the risk of funding new real estate projects. The Canadian economy, already facing challenges, is now on the brink of a full-blown crisis. The government has promised emergency funding and support for those affected, but the situation is moving so quickly that it is difficult to keep up. The bureaucratic response has been slow, and many Canadians are frustrated with the lack of action. As the crisis unfolds, it is becoming increasingly clear that the government must take immediate and decisive action if they hope to prevent further damage. The stakes are high, and the clock is ticking. But even as the government scrambles to respond, the damage is being done. The cracks in Canada's foundation, both literal and figurative, are becoming more apparent with each passing day. As we watch this crisis unfold, it's hard not to wonder what the future holds for Canada's cities. Will they ever recover from this disaster? Or will this be the moment that changes everything for Canadian infrastructure? The real threat is not just the immediate damage, but the long-term consequences of this crisis. If entire districts become uninhabitable, the economic and social repercussions could be felt for generations to come. The housing market, once the backbone of Canada's economy, could collapse entirely. Cities like Vancouver and Toronto, already facing issues with affordability and supply, could become ghost towns as people flee to more stable areas. The damage to the economy could be staggering, with job losses, business closures, and a dramatic rise in homelessness. As we move forward, one thing is certain. Canada is facing an unprecedented crisis, one that could reshape the nation for years to come. The question is not whether the country will recover, but how it will recover, and whether the government will act quickly enough to prevent further destruction. The situation in Canada is growing more dire by the hour. As the cracks in buildings continue to spread, engineers are working tirelessly, but even they are beginning to admit the full scope of the crisis may be beyond their control. The number of buildings deemed uninhabitable is rising daily, and the impacts are being felt in every corner of the nation. The streets of Canada's largest cities, once bustling with life, are now filled with empty storefronts, boarded-up homes, and families scrambling for safety. Many Canadians are finding themselves displaced, facing a future that seems more uncertain by the day. The cracks that were once thought to be isolated issues have now revealed a much larger problem, one that threatens to destabilize the entire country. The financial impact is already being felt. The real estate market, which had already been struggling under the weight of skyrocketing prices, is now in a freefall. Homeowners, who had been holding onto their properties in hopes of higher returns, are now seeing their investments turn into liabilities. As property values plummet, many Canadians are facing the harsh reality of underwater mortgages, homes worth less than what they owe. The result is a financial catastrophe that has left thousands of homeowners in a state of panic. The government's promised support is coming too slowly, and many are left to fend for themselves in the face of mounting debt and uncertainty. Construction companies are also reeling from the fallout. Contractors, who were once thriving in a booming housing market, are now going bankrupt as projects are halted and insurance claims mount. Developers who had invested millions of dollars in construction are now left with half-finished buildings, worthless land, and an uncertain future. Some are even turning to legal battles to recover their losses, while others are simply walking away, unable to continue their work. It's a situation that's ripping apart the fabric of Canada's construction industry, and the damage is unlikely to be repaired anytime soon. As the crisis continues to unfold, the political response has been under intense scrutiny. Premier after premier and Prime Minister after Prime Minister have been called upon to address the crisis, but their reactions have been slow and inconsistent. Initially, there was confusion and a lack of clear communication from the government. Evacuation orders were issued, but the process was chaotic. People were left wondering whether their homes would be safe or whether they would be forced to leave everything behind. In the meantime, the government scrambled to put together emergency funds, but many felt that the money came too late. With construction companies going bankrupt, banks pulling out of real estate investments, and thousands of people being displaced, the government's response appeared to be inadequate. As a result, public trust in the system is at an all-time low. The political contradictions surrounding the crisis are also becoming evident. For years, city officials had championed the construction of high-density buildings in order to address the housing shortage. But now, with the very structures they pushed for in danger of collapse, the politicians who supported these projects are left scrambling to explain themselves. How could they have overlooked such a glaring issue? How could they have failed to ensure that the buildings they approved were built to last? These are the questions that are now being asked, but answers are few and far between. The politicians who once touted their commitment to solving Canada's housing crisis are now facing an entirely new set of problems that they may not have the answers to. The cracks in the foundations of Canada's buildings are not the only thing that is crumbling. The trust in Canada's political system is also beginning to erode. Canadians are watching as their homes, businesses, and investments are being wiped out, and they are looking to their leaders for answers. But so far, those answers have been lacking. The government's inability to effectively address the crisis has left many feeling betrayed. The fear that many once had about the future of the housing market is now becoming a reality. As more and more buildings are deemed unsafe, Canadians are left wondering if their entire way of life is in jeopardy. In the meantime, the real human cost of this disaster continues to unfold. Families who had invested everything into their homes are now left homeless, with no clear path forward. Some are staying with relatives, while others are seeking temporary shelter in makeshift accommodations. The emotional toll is staggering. People who once felt secure in their homes are now facing an uncertain future. Some are struggling with the financial strain of paying for repairs they can't afford, while others are being forced to leave everything behind. The stress of the situation is taking a toll on people's mental health, with rising levels of anxiety, depression, and despair. But the crisis doesn't stop there. The long-term effects of this disaster will be felt for years to come. The damage to Canada's real estate market will take years to recover from. Entire neighborhoods that were once thriving will remain abandoned, with people unwilling to return until they can be sure their homes are safe. The economy, already in a precarious state due to rising interest rates and inflation, will only suffer further. Without a stable real estate market, there will be fewer opportunities for job growth, and businesses will be hesitant to invest in Canada. The construction industry, which has been a key driver of the Canadian economy, will take a massive hit. Thousands of workers will find themselves without jobs, and many will struggle to find new employment in an economy that is increasingly uncertain. The fear is growing that this crisis could spread even further. As more buildings are inspected, the number of cracks and structural flaws is increasing. Some engineers are now warning that entire districts could collapse if the government doesn't act quickly. The urgency is palpable, but time is running out. As the months pass, the risks continue to escalate. The longer the government waits, the more difficult it will be to prevent widespread destruction. The cracks in Canada's infrastructure are a symptom of a much larger problem, one that has been building for years and may now be coming to a head. For many Canadians, the future is uncertain. The dreams they once had of owning a home or building a business may now be shattered. The real estate market is in chaos, and the economy is teetering on the brink of collapse. As the crisis unfolds, it is clear that this is not just an issue of damaged buildings, it is an issue of national security. The foundation of Canada's cities is crumbling, and without immediate action, the country could face an unprecedented collapse. What happens next? Will the government act in time to prevent further destruction? Or will the crisis continue to spiral out of control? The clock is ticking, and the stakes are higher than ever before. This is not just a real estate issue, this is a matter of survival. Canada must face the reality of its crumbling infrastructure before it's too late. If you're watching this and you want to stay informed about the latest developments in this unfolding crisis, make sure to leave a comment saying 1 below and subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss the next video, where we'll explore the full extent of the damage, the political fallout, and the long-term implications of this unprecedented disaster. Stay tuned, because the story is far from over.